This episode and Emily's monologue about the stages of grief still means more than any other episode of Revenge to me. My father was not murdered and died of natural causes, but for me it was too early still. I did not know or could not understand how grave his cancer was, so his death came out of nowhere for me. Even more because it was when the cancer had come back that he finally died. What me and my mother did not know until his death. And now that my mother is dead, too, I can even more relate to Emily's final monologue that you cannot stand a chance against grief. Others than the phases of dying, it has a circle structure and always comes back, especially on the holidays as Christmas and special anniversaries. So I love the metaphor with this circle structure in this episode. It gives all that happens here more meaning. I know after watching it twice this trick with her digging a grave is cheap. Because now we do know that this grave is not for a human. But on first watch it was cool because throughout the whole episode the audience is trying to find out for whom this grave might be. At the end I am happy that they only killed Sammy. It was maybe the saddest scene I have seen after the death of Emily's loved ones in season 2, 3 and 4 of course. And for the death of an animal it was a very long sequence with stunning acting by Emily Van Camp and Nick Wexler. They really made us feel the loss, even though if you are not a dog person like me or have not such a connection to a pet at all. When some of my budgies dies after several years I am devastated as well. You spend such a long time with them and they really grew like a friend to you. I think people who do not have a pet of their own cannot understand how fond you can grow of a living creature even if it does not speak your language. About rewatching Mason's interview tapes. I like to think about this as some kind of reconnecting with her father. Emily does not watch these kind of interviews with David for research. She just wants to see her dad again, as painful and hard that might be. I think anyone who has footage of their loved ones can relate to that. The pain but also the joy when you hear their voices again. For me it is special when I see some old footage of my dad before his cancer operation. Because he had laryngeal cancer and his natural sounded very different from the one I remembered with this little device that was creating his voice. But enough of that sad story. I love that Emily and the showrunners find a way to reconnect herself and the audience with David Clarke, not solely with flashbacks. It has some kind of hope in it. It might be far-fetched, but I think that was the reason why I always thought or more wished they would bring David back. Because with the flashbacks and all these photographs and videos it felt as if he was always part of the show. About Emily's quest for the white-haired men. I think this was always meant as some kind of coping with bereavement. Because Emily had never been close again to her father before his death and believed he was responsible for all that horrible things. She never really felt the pain of his death. I mean, yes, she always felt the loss and pain of not being with her father. But she was not actually there when her father died, which makes it a bit unreal. I can remember when the police came to tell me and my mother that my father had died, I could not believe it. I thought it was some kind of a cruel joke or prank. Amanda obviously knows and understands right away that her father is gone, but I think she still cannot accept the consequences. And she is still in denial or cannot cope with the feelings that comes with it. In a way she is trapped in this stage when you cannot accept that something like this happened to you and your family. She is constantly angry about this cruel fate that was thrown at her and her father and that she could not do anything about it back then. On top of it there is the new fact that it was not cruel destiny or a coincidence that killed her father, but that he was murdered. And that his murder has never been faced punishment and still lives on. About Emily observing every of Conrad's and Daniel's moves. As I said before, with bugging Grayson Manor and now even Conrad's office at Grayson Global, I think they got too far. If it was the initiative, as Conrad later assumes, I would understand if Nolan had helped Emily to tap the signal. But Nolan is surprised by her bugging Grayson Manor, and surely does not know how she bugged Grayson Global, too. So I am more than a little in doubt that Emily has become that skilled in espionage. Though it could have been a training session within Takeda's education. They never really show us how Emily was trained and in what exactly. So you can only assume that all her skills for her revenge mission come from this source. Anyway, if she was really in that deep by bugging them, record their conversations and hacking into the Grayson Global computer system, why the hell does she not have or get enough information to put them in jail for good? I must admit that was and still is the thing that annoys me the most at the end of Season 1. I know for Season 2 they had to reset it because they did not know how long the show would last. And on some level they had to keep the revenge storyline going back and forth in Season 2 and 3 just to fill the episodes. But it was more than annoying that her level of information and skills was this high at the end of Season 1 and then crumbled to zero in Season 2. And here we come to the big new bad, the initiative. Though it was entertaining seeing Conrad actually being afraid, it made the white-haired men even more frightening than he already was to me. And I loved seeing Conrad and Victoria in defense. I never enjoyed that storyline. In fact, I still hate the initiative plot and prefer to forget about it. That was the baddest idea the writers of Revenge ever had. I can understand and accept the need to have a new and bigger villain in the second season. They always try to be bigger and better in the second season and they mostly fail. Like here in Revenge, most second seasons of TV shows suck. I have seen only a handful TV shows in which the second season was better or at least as good as the first one. I wonder why that is. Maybe it is exaggerated expectations in combination with executives who wants to make it right for everybody, which is never a good perspective for any kind of artistic work. Anyway, this whole initiative is just too mysterious. In these 2 episodes they got away with it just that because we all thought they would solve this riddle perfectly and with great logical coherence in Season 2. But after a few episodes they made just such a mess and produced so much confusion that they could not solve anything of this. But we get to this when we talk about the actual episodes in Season 2. For now, I was happy that the initiative was only mentioned as a great but mysterious threat that even Conrad feared, and that they concentrated on the immediate threat of Gordon Murphy as their representative. Though he seems not that impressive, I like the totally ordinary look they gave Gordon Murphy. He is really the man who hides in plain sight, as Emily says about him. With his suit he fits right into the atmosphere of Grayson Global. And his presence always reminds me of the Graham Men Who Steal Time in the children's book Momo by Michael Ender. They had no white hair but no hair at all, but they wore grey suits like businessmen and smoked cigarettes. I much enjoyed this little dance between Emily and Gordon Murphy. He seems to enjoy it as much as the audience and really admires Emily's skills. Major spoiler alert, after knowing that he was in love with her mother, I think that he kind of likes Emily. Not necessarily because of her mother, but because Emily resembles her in many ways. Spoiler alert too. If her mother was mentally ill or not, I think she had never that great interest in her daughter. Maybe she even never loved her that much. In the flashbacks, her mother seems sometimes caring and sometimes very much indifferent. So I guess her daughter was just not that important to her and triggered not that much of emotion as you would expect. What I mean, I do not think that she spoke much of Amanda after she left the family. And there would have been no reason to discuss this surely painful time in her life with a new lover. However, I like that there seems to be some kind of connection and even affection between Emily and the white-haired man. About Daniel and Emily in the morning. funny it is almost as if Emily does forget overnight that she is still with Daniel and is disappointed when she wakes up next to him. In season 2 and 3 they got some similar scenes in which she is cold and dismissive with Daniel and barely can hold herself together. But as callous and not giving a damn about him as in this scene with Daniel she was never before and after. It almost seems as if she hates him right now while he does not know what is going on and also cares about her health because he had never seen her ill. By the way, we actually never saw Emily bruised or injured till this episode after her fight with Gordon Murphy. She always appeared invincible. I enjoyed it when they came back to this matter in season 3 when Nolan heavily feared for her sanity after she got those blackouts. And in season 4 after she survived that fire in Jack's bar when she checked out of hospital and he literally told her that she was just human and not indestructible. I think the pressure with finding and willing to kill the white-haired man in his interview and the fact Daniel is colluding with his father is just too much for Emily. She seems even willing to blow her cover with Daniel and let him leave her. What is funny that she does not want a big event in pure Grayson fashion but then in season 3 gets exactly this with a glamorous photo shoot on top. I think the writers wanted to console and pacify the audience. 'Cause we were promised a big wedding at the end of season 1 and did not get one. And instead of showing us the highly anticipated event in season 2 we got to see not only one but 2 weddings that were not Emily's and Daniel's. So they had to give us a big event in season 3 to make us happy. I was surely happy about the whole wedding storyline. But back to Daniel and Emily. I always enjoy this theme and that they stick to it till season 3. After the rift between Emily and Daniel, which Daniel is not even aware of. She can barely stand kissing or touching him. Emily is so full of anger and disgust for Daniel that she fails putting up her perfect girlfriend persona. Till season 2 Daniel seems not to care, maybe because he is too busy with Grayson Global and the Dumb Initiative. But at the end of season 2 and even more in season 3 he finally recognizes the change in Emily's behavior towards him. So this story arc was something I enjoyed through all seasons. Not only because it mirrors the broken marriage of Daniel's parents, it underlines how fake Emily truly is and that till she can be Amanda again has no real life but a fake one and therefore just fake relationships. Spoiler alert. This is a huge topic in season 4 and the only aspect of her relationship with Ben that I actually enjoyed. Even more because it ultimately leads to their highly anticipated breakup. About the ruse for Conrad to get closer to the white-haired man. I enjoyed this little internal joke with her putting the camera into the George Orwell book 1984. And Nolan's remark about the video just showing Emily and Daniel sleeping resolves why Emily pretended having a headache. In part like any fed-up woman who cannot stand her man anymore because she did not want to sleep with Daniel. But also because she did not want to make a sex tape for Conrad and the white-haired man to watch. Anyway, it reminds me of the fact that we are supposed to assume that Emily and Daniel are still sleeping together till their wedding in season 3. Even though we just see her making out with Aiden. Because the first and also last sex scene we saw with Daniel was in one of the first episodes. I always wondered why they never showed us the two together again. Maybe both actors were not comfortable with it because they got together in real life and did not want to share those intimate scenes with the world. But I assume they did not want to show her as a slut, so they tried to play it down that she was sleeping with Aiden and Daniel at the same time. For most of season 2 and 3. About Victoria's safe and the immunity agreement. I like to see that Victoria learns from her mistakes. After Emily got to know the combination of her safe, she updated her security measures. And that immunity deal with the government shows again how clever Victoria is when she needs to protect herself. The only thing that I liked about the plot here is how they made it clear what a difficult task it is to gather information about Conrad's crimes. He seemed to be very careful and smart by planning, executing and afterwards cover up the David Clarke conspiracy. Though it is a huge task to keep such a vast group of conspirators in check. I assume it was a mixture of bribing them with money, positions and social status, and blackmailing them or threatening them with death, of course. I understand why they felt the need to expand the scope of the conspiracy. It is hard to imagine that one man alone has the resources and the ability to keep such a conspiracy hidden and functioning all this time. But I guess since a corrupt and inefficient legal system helped him, the task was not so big. After the damning judgment, no one cared about David Clarke anymore. So there was no need to put much effort in hiding things. About Daniel trying to bribe Jack. I must admit I was more distracted with the health problems of Jack's dog Sammy. Though the scene was very subtle, but the cute dog and his health issues just stole both Joshua Bowman and Nick Wexler the show. And though I am not that into Jack's character, I really enjoyed how much he was caring about the dog and how obviously good he took care of him. Like he promised little Amanda years ago. I know in reality the dog had to be dead for several years now. But he was the last connection between Amanda and Jack. About the $1 million. For me it was no question that Jack would not agree to that offer. It would have been too much out of character for him. Though the idea of establishing a charity with Emily's help was as intriguing as seeing both characters spending more time together. Emily seems to have some experience in this area as she was introduced as a socialite who supports various charities. And it would have gave Jack a new opportunity to get close to Emily. But in the end, now that he knows what the Graysons are capable of, he tries to stay away from them, what surely was not a bad idea. By the way, I like Daniel's new look. Since the trial he wears that three-piece suits with the vest. Very English and very elegant. Not many men can wear a vest because it mercilessly shows when you have the slightest tendency to get fat. Patrick Jane in The Mentalist wore vest too. It gave him a more official look since he was no real police officer but supported the police as a consultant. And I must admit, while watching this show I was very into this tall Australian actor, Simon Baker, with the blonde and curly hair. And I must admit, since Joshua Bowman is actual British, this style really suits him. In season 1 and 2 it gives Daniel a more serious and grown-up look too. About Victoria, Lydia and Conrad. I like that Victoria's motives are purely selfish. She only wants to turn Conrad in to hurt and punish him, not because it is the right thing to do. This flashback to her affair with Dominic makes it clear. Her revenge is punishment that Conrad took away from her this little chance of happiness again. It also clarifies the difference between Emily's revenge agenda and Victoria's little revenge quest. For Victoria this is just a snapshot. She does this solely out of hurt feelings and the need to inflict pain on Conrad. For Emily, her revenge is her whole life and purpose. She wants to undo the ill-doings of others and punish the ones who are responsible for those crimes. In short, she wants justice for her, her father and all the other people that were harmed or killed by the Graysons in their conspirators. That is a huge difference not only in scale but in motive and character. But their motives and bold character just makes it that much fun to watch Conrad and Victoria fight against each other. I enjoyed their war and must admit was sad when it ended so soon in season 2. Spoiler alert. After all, he tried to kill her and she remarries him. I loved her blood red dress. Though it is very much simple and more fitting for a teenager who goes to a party, it shows what Victoria is up to. She is out for blood and as committed as Emily to take Conrad down. Seeing Lydia back was no big surprise for me. Since we are not far from the final episode and Mason already came back, and after that flashback episode, it was not that hard to figure out that they would bring back more favorite characters. Though many critics hated this about Revenge, I always enjoy this bringing back characters out of order and logic. It is a style element of soap operas like the fake deaths. So if you are into such kind of shows, you have to love it or at least get over it. Lydia seems always running back to Conrad throughout the whole show. This is her most consistent behavior and it seems to me her sole purpose. So I love to see her team up with Victoria later to save herself. The two socialites are very much alike. They both depend on Conrad and sometimes are too trusting with him. Lydia more than Victoria for obvious reasons. While Victoria is despising Conrad and only comes back to him to save herself when being threatened, Lydia seems to be truly in love and merely obsessed with him. Too bad she did not get the chance to marry him. And as I said before, I am sure that he is only using her for pastime and to hurt Victoria, his one true love. About Lydia's look, I know it was over the top with these shoes and her all-in-one Playboy bunny outfit, but it is fitting to her character. Lydia would do anything for Conrad, even if it means playing this ridiculous old man fantasy of a mistress in Playboy fashion. About Declan and Charlotte again. I love this scene with Declan and a new friend. Before Charlotte came and ruined it with her assumption he already got a new girlfriend. I almost thought that they finally would Declan allow to break free of her. And this girl had some potential. Not only because she had the same background. She immediately helped Declan searching for his dog. You can say that she maybe wanted to get credit for that and had her sights on him when he was even with Charlotte. But from the little we saw of her, I assume that she is just a nice girl. And not every classmate would have done this for a boy they do not know that intimate. She could have gone home and called it a day, but she helped him without expecting something in return. That really could have opened an opportunity here. Not for a steamy sex scene as Charlotte obviously thought, but for a new friendship and potential new girlfriend that would have been better for Declan. Too bad the writers obviously just put her in to make Charlotte jealous, realize what she lost and win back Declan in season 2. By the way, I like her curly hair, matches the curls of Formander. About Nolan trying to prevent Emily from killing the white-haired man. I like this conversation here. I almost forgot about it cause there are much more of these type of scenes in season 3. Throughout the show, especially in season 3 and 4, Nolan tries to keep Emily in check and prevents her from doing things she will regret forever. Like here, killing someone. I adore that he calls her a sociopath, but in the same breath doubting she is capable of killing someone. Though Emily's answer comes with a straight face and right away, I doubt that her coolness is more than an act. She is fully aware of the consequences of her decision and the danger that comes with it by fighting this man face to face. Her little argument with Daniel is a testimony of her tight nerves. About Daniel and Ashley coming at the exact wrong time. How irrelevant Daniel and his needs have become for Emily is best told in this sequence. While he and Ashley try to plan Emily's and Daniel's wedding, a huge step for every pair, Emily is constantly distracted by Nolan's messages. I love how they made the audience not only see but share Emily's anger about Daniel and Ashley. Finding and finally confronting this man is so important for Emily and her revenge agenda. And here they are distracting her from this task of her life with these petty little and irrelevant details about a wedding she even is not sure she wants anymore. On a rational level, one understands why Daniel is so pissed at her and finds her behavior rude and inconvenient. Not only towards him but Ashley, who put much work and effort in their wedding plans. However, as we know, this is the murder of her father, and she could exact revenge on him if she only got the information she needs to find him. I am on Emily's side. This is a total waste of time while she has so much more important things to do and places to be. For control freak Emily, this alone must have been hell and is the reason why she keeps exchanging texts with Nolan. And I love the twist which made Emily even more angry that she was not there in person to track Gordon Murphy down. In a last attempt to prevent Emily from murdering Nolan, gave her the wrong address. Back to Daniel and Emily. If I would have been here, I just would have stormed out with no explanation. I mean, their relationship is slowly dying anyway, and she could have come up with a good explanation later. Meanwhile, I was so annoyed by the two that I wished Emily would have just stabbed Daniel, or at least thrown both out. I know they are not to blame. Daniel does not know anything about Emily's secret agenda, but was there no better time than right now to go through this? He must have noticed how heightened her tension was, and not because they were planning their wedding. Anyway, Emily can be lucky that Daniel was not that nosy, because if he had looked on her phone and the history of messages, that conversation would have gone in a totally different direction. And Emily would have had to do a lot of explaining. By the way, I love how Nolan steps in and really tries to save the day. It was the first time that he got on his own without Emily as his backup. A shame he failed, but the idea of spying on the white-haired man instead of killing him right away was not that bad. About Victoria finding the evidence of Conrad's crimes. That was a fun way to close that backstory, with Dominic the art forger and young Vicky as his accomplice. I loved when Conrad found Victoria's notice with his quote, because the sentence is fitting for both men, Dominic and Conrad. The fact that Conrad only put all the things he collected as some kind of insurance policy or safety net back together and hid it in his new apartment was even more ironic, because he did this only because Conrad felt threatened by Gordon Murphy and the initiative, which was only because Emily played Conrad and the white-haired man against each other. So Victoria could not take Conrad down without Emily's help. And Emily needs the information and proofs for Conrad's crimes Victoria is willing to hand over to the authorities. A nice vicious circle they made up here for the first finale. About Lydia's fashion again. I must admit that even though she is not often seen in Revenge, that Lydia is mostly even more stylish than Victoria. Maybe because she is a little bit more brave than her. And she seems still in this phase where she likes to show off her status and wealth by wearing extravagant designer clothes. Victoria's sense for fashion is more subtle, and she seems to be beyond having to put on a show. Anyway, I loved Lydia's red dress in the last scene with her and Conrad for this season. And as I mentioned before, the color scheme of her wearing green seems to be important for her jealous and greedy character, too. Oh, and what I forgot about Emily's and Daniel's first fight. Funny that he mentions the Grayson name, because that is all Emily can think about right now. And another detail that comes to me by watching Conrad threatening to expose the initiative. They made a big mistake with this initiative plot and the end of season 2. I assume they were afraid of falling ratings and saw that this plot was not only going nowhere but annoying viewers as well. Major spoiler alert for season 2. They had Conrad burst out in a fight with Victoria that there never has been an initiative. For me, they digged a huge plot hole here, even for the whole backstory with David Clarke's trial. If there was no initiative, there was no terror organization who forced Conrad to finance homegrown terrorism. And then there was no need of a cover-up for blowing up that plane and putting David in jail for this crime in the first place. And they made the whole story arc of the Graysons in season 2 obsolete. Spoiler alert 2. because the whole time Conrad and Victoria feared sanctions from the initiative and that Daniel's safety being endangered by said organization, it was just Conrad's sham. Okay, that could have been Conrad's act to keep his son and wife in check. But what about the plane crash? If he manufactured it, why did he felt guilty about it? And how can he be forced to do something if he engineered it? Or was this an act to get Victoria's help in covering it up? That would have been really malice even for Conrad. For consistency, it would have been far better if Gordon Murphy was Conrad's henchman and now would blackmail him with exposing all he knows. Would be close to the story with Lee Moran, but it would have gave the white-haired man far more importance. And that would explain why Conrad is the big bad after the Season 2 finale. He was behind it all the time and just used the initiative as a cover for his own ambitions and objectives, whatever they may have been. Maybe he is a terrorist after all and wanted to kill all those people. I know that this is going to be the finale of the season, so it is tradition that they put all storylines upside down. And people making life-changing decisions that put their life at risk or at least turn them around into the arms of another love interest and so on. But it was painful to see that Emily was no doubt determined to kill this man even if she was killed in the process. These thoughts not only raised the stakes, it was also something what I thought Emily would have ruled out as punishment for her targets. I know she wanted to destroy those people and their careers, which is bad enough, but that she turned to such violent thoughts really struck me. Sure, this man executed her father because it was his job. And obviously is not sorry about it, even if he, spoiler alert, is sleeping with the dead man's wife. But could she not gather information about this guy who is clearly something like an assassin and put him forever in jail for all his murder? Must have been that hard to find recent murder victims of him and evidence for his crimes, especially for Emily. About bringing the black hoodie back. With this fashion accessoire, Emily looks always like a criminal herself. They try to underline that she is another person when she is revenging. Though in my opinion this revenging Emily will always be her nature because she has been her for so long. Anyway, I love that they show her as badass as Gordon Murphy, the white-haired man. Their fighting skills and thinking seems to be on the same level. In another universe, I think they all could have been a strange but happy family. Emily and stepfather Gordon working as assassins or fixer for anyone who hires them. And their mother keeping the cover behind a neat little house with a white fence. About the editing. This was some of the most exciting sequences. First of all because all the clocks and their ticking and the intercuts with Emily seemingly getting ready to confront the white-haired man. I like that he is already suspicious not of her, but he knows that something is going on behind his back. And I just love the twist with Carol Miller awaiting Emily and trying to talk some sense into her. Since Aidan is not around yet, Nolan had to turn to her because Jack does not know anything about Emily's revenge agenda. About their conversation. I like that Emily mentions the victims of the plane crash. I know I said it before, but they keep forgetting about this. The core story is the framing of David I. No, but the plane crash was a huge catastrophe and crime itself. When I think about all these lives that were destroyed in one moment, it is like September 11. We always speak about the people in the Twin Towers that died. But there were also many innocent people who died in that two planes that were used as bombs. So the original sin of Conrad is not the framing of David Clarke, but the plane crash he or the initiative engineered with his money. About Nolan's first and last disguise. Nolan's disguise as cable guy with a beanie and fake beard was just hilarious. For me, that his appearance was really good. Even as a contractor, he could have been that nervous because he does not like to speak with people. Some of the IT guys are that way even if you see them in field work. His bad luck was that Gordon Murphy is already alarmed because of his conversation with Conrad. about Sammy's dying scene. That Sammy still tried to get back to Emily and his old home was a nice end for his story. As I said earlier, it seems to be common behavior that dogs try to find their old home and master. So it is only natural that after Sammy recognized Amanda that he kept going back to her. Maybe after she was coming over and he lived at the beach house with Emily while Jack was away, he was content with Emily visiting him. After all these years, Jack's spa must have been a second home for him. But as he was feeling that he would die, he wanted to see her one last time, so he went over to the beach house. In a way, it was a very clever wrap-up to let Emily and Jack bond over Sammy's death and that their connection came to an end at the same time. Though it might be a little bit ghoulish that they kissed over a dead body. But hey, this is television. I have seen far more scary things in some vampire shows, like literally making out in a room and a bed with dead bodies. So this is not at all inappropriate or scary for me. About the kiss, I think besides season 2, for obvious reasons, Emily and Jack got a kiss scene in every season. And I must admit that this first one is my least favorite. I mean, I was happy for them cause Emily needs some love and happiness in her life to balance out all the bad that has and is still happening to her. And as we saw earlier with Daniel, it is not going any better. So there has to be another love interest. Though I was happy that Aiden came for that in season 2. I appreciate what they are trying here for the Gemily fans. Because it is not Jack who makes the first move, it is actually Emily herself. After all the tension and that heightened emotions with the anger about Daniel and Nolan and her trying to kill Gordon Murphy or get killed by him, Emily did let go, and for the first time after Daniel opened her heart and let all her emotions out. And the little flashback before with happy Amanda, Jack, David and Sammy on the beach was just the cherry onto the cake. More than the actual kiss, I liked that Nick Wexler is really letting go and cries his heart out over the death of his dog. I am sure he is not only crying about losing the dog, he is also crying because he thinks he has lost Amanda forever. Spoiler alert. When Emily and Jack talk about why she lied to him about her true identity for so long in the first episode of season 3, Jack is making a list of all the times when Emily had the chance and maybe also the obligation to tell him the truth. He mentioned the night with his love confession at the beginning of season 1 and this night when Sammy died and they kissed for the first time. I know Emily needed a very good reason to tell Jack the truth because it was risky to let him know it in any season. But if she had told him the truth now, their relationship could have gone in a whole other direction very quick. Not only because of the kiss but because Amanda still was out of the picture. If the writers wanted to be that two together, this was their chance. But surely they already planned Amanda coming back and Aiden as a new love interest for Emily. So till season 3 this ship was sailed. About Ashley seeing the kiss, this was the best opportunity for Ashley and I cannot see why she did not go straight to Daniel to tell him about it. Maybe there was still some loyalty towards Emily or she did not want to hurt him that way. However, it was good that Daniel got to know about this fast. It would have only been an unnecessary burden for Emily to keep this a secret as well before Daniel. And their relationship was already going down, so why wait till season 2? About Jack's and Emily's conversation. I think Emily always loved the idea of living together with Jack as Amanda Clarke. It seems as if before Amanda came back that was always a secret dream inside her head. Telling Jack who she really was and then living the life they both thought they had been robbed of but still deserved. With Aiden and Amanda in season 2 and 3, I always doubted that they would make this dream come true. And it is only fair to say I wished they had made Emily end up with Aiden. Especially after Jack got more and more angry over Emily's behavior and did not seem to understand her revenge agenda at all. But in season 4 I think we all knew that this dream would come true, and it was annoying to see that they delayed it again with Ben and Kate. What I do not like about their rekindled feelings is that Amanda seems to be second price for Jack cause he is still in love with Emily. That is not fair, especially with the thought in mind that Formander always felt not good enough and loves Emily nearly as much as Jack, or in another way, this whole love triangle is in the same amount beautiful as tragic, and was maybe the most beautiful and complicated I have seen so far. Not only because of the identity swap, but also because of these fluent and ever-changing feelings the characters had for each other. About Charlotte's ruined therapy session. I hate the attitude of all Grayson family members, Daniel included, towards Charlotte's therapy session. Daniel seems to see it as a joke, through of all, as an alcoholic must understand how important it is for Charlotte to get away from those drugs, and that Conrad and Victoria use this therapy session to slug their war is just selfish, thoughtless and rude. But what I like is Daniel's reaction. It seems he is quite familiar with those fights, since we have seen a lot of them throughout the course of Season 1. And I just love Conrad's line about Victoria's anemic senses. That is just so funny, cause it is exactly the opposite. Victoria is far more clever and ferocious than he even can imagine. About Declan and Jack mourning Sammy. That was just a nice and sweet little scene. Surely the family dog meant as much to Declan as to Jack because he was that long around. It was a fine appreciation that they took the time to show how not only Emily and Jack mourned the death of this long-time friend. Only people who have pets themselves can understand what a tragic loss and hole in your heart originates when your pet dies. I have lost many birds over the years and it is still devastating every time. I love this last scene with her and Daniel and Emily's monologue. Daniel comes with his keyword anger, and her last phrase, "You never stood a chance," is obviously aimed at Nolan being kidnapped by the white-haired man. But it also can be aimed at her and Daniel's relationship coming to an end, and at her never having a chance in the fight with the white-haired man or the Graysons. Last but no least, it's literally meaning that she cannot escape her grief, although Emily tries to cover it with her anger and the energy she puts into her revenge agenda. So they got what they wanted. As I first saw this, I could not wait to see the finale, and that must have been with many of the viewers, if not all.